an area close to both of our hearts, which is entrepreneurship, starting companies, starting products. So everyone is going in AI today. What does it mean to actually be AI native? I think most people misunderstand this, but matter of fact, of all the people I know, you are the most AI native person. So say a little bit about what being AI native is and how does it change the kinds of problems entrepreneurs might choose or the way they might go after, starting a company, going after a market, thinking about how they operate from the very earliest days.
This is something, and I think I'm one of the early AI natives, but I have a feeling the next generation will be even more AI native. There are people I've met that have never even used a keyboard, and for them, that's like an alien experience. A mouse and a keyboard. They're used to the trackpad laptop kind of experience. But I think even when I think about AI native, I think pretty much I have this like realization multiple times a week where I see something that a model can do. I see that, oh, Codex can now work for 2 days straight if you allow it to plan very deeply. Same thing with Opus, Cloud Code Opus. You can give it a planning framework. If you allow it to take notes on its own progress, it's able to work for 2 days straight. And then I read the paper, and then I fire it up on a project, and I see it working, and it's like 3 hours deep doing like productive work for me, and I'm just like, oh my God. And then I go for a walk, and I'm just thinking, I'm like I'm walking right now, but I'm also being productive, right? I have these processes running. And then my mind starts going and I'm thinking like, where are we, like, where do we apply this new capability? But this happens like every other week, right? Some new capability comes online and then I have to go for a walk and think, well, where does this apply? And a lot of times I think I take like, okay, let's just describe the workflow as it is, how we normally do it, the normal problem that we're trying to solve. And then I go to a language model. I say, given we now have X, Y, Z capabilities, how might we reimagine this workflow so that we can do it in a more parallelized way, in a more extensible, modular way? How can we reduce the drudgery of the human experience in this work? And then like maybe write the first version of that. And I usually allow it to think for like a whole day and work on that for a whole day. And it is something that I try to get a pattern of where I describe the problem, I take it to the smartest model I know, I tell it to think about a couple different plans, and then I tell agents to start working on those plans, executing in those directions. A lot of times you don't get like something that works, on the first try, but you get a lot of promising directions, or you get like 80% of the way there, and all of a sudden you've eliminated like 100 hours of work a week. And or like now the few people that are working on this can go way further. They can think in a more like there's the parallelization of cognition now, right? Where it used to be that every human was the bottleneck in any job, but now you take a process that someone does, you have them equipped with agents, and then they're parallelized across many different parallel streams in that process. And that's something that's amazing. I think not rethinking of yourself as like being able to atomize a task, decompose it, and then parallelize subcomponents of it, and then lean on the computer for those pieces. It just feels like a superpower.
So give me a real life example.
So one thing that I'm known for in my own friend group is as this guy, like the guy that's just like deep in the coding agents, deep on the frontier of like what came out last week, what's the new superpower that we have. And a lot of my friends, they still, they work at normal companies, they have normal jobs, they're building their own companies, and a lot of them are programmers. And so for me, it's like I get to experience the first version of the superpower, but my friends are better engineers than me. And so I'm kind of like, is it because I'm a noob, or is it because I'm like kind of just teaching myself everything that it all feels magical? Or does someone who's also much more experienced than me experience a different kind of amplification? So for example, earlier this year, we got Cloud Code came out and it started taking off like wildfire within my workflows. And then I was like, well, is it just me? So then I took it to, I called all my best programmer friends in SF, and we got dinner. And we were sitting there at dinner, and I was like, guys, Cloud Code, this feels like the step forward in coding automation that I've been like waiting for, like looking at different angles of, and here's what it does for me. And these are the same guys that saw me when I first interacted with Cursor. So they were like, hey, if he's right, and like we should get early on this. And so I had my buddy Amila. Amila is a startup founder, and he's working on a company called Palette. And it's just two of them. It's just two engineers working on this company. And it's the company, what they do is JavaScript optimization. So they are trying to make the web interface and the web interfaces faster. So tools like Notion, how do you make them responsive, low latency experiences? And his entire thing is, how do we make the web faster? Like, there's a lot of JavaScript. How do we make it all faster? And so we were sitting there at dinner and I was talking to him about the cutting edge of coding agents. And I was like, here's why I feel like it's amplifying me. Here are the problems I can solve. And I think you should be using it. I mean, you're a startup founder, right? Like, you should be using Claude Code before you even think about hiring anyone. And at first he was a little dismissive. And this, I think, is usually because he's a really good JavaScript programmer. I think he's like probably one of the best that I know. And that comes with this like pride and also a very high expectation. So yes, in some cases, like AI generated code can be slop, but that doesn't make it useless, right? We work with people that are not perfect, and
we ourselves are not perfect.
We are not perfect, right? But to get zero value would be shocking. And so I give him Claude Code, and then a couple months later, I'm like, oh, Codex is also very good now. OpenAI's Codex is competing on a similar plane. And so we get dinner 4 months later, and this is just like, I'd say 3 months ago now. We get dinner again, and he pulls me aside and he says, Parth, like, I'm so glad you showed me these coding agents, because now we are launching an enterprise partnership. It's still two of us, and we're just like, it's nailing extremely hard migrations. Codex is able to like understand and solve an arcane problem in 20 minutes that would have otherwise taken me a week with all of my time. And he's like, if you think about yourself as a solo founder or like a 2-person team, you have many other responsibilities other than programming. And that he can delegate to these intelligent copilot systems that can actually like solve some of these multi-day problems for him. It means that like he's seeing this, like, he really feels like it is something that is, he can't imagine hiring people that don't interact with these tools as well, right? And so it's a totally new play style. And my thing is like, okay, cool, I need to figure out the next part of that game, right? The like orchestration of multiple of these. And everyone's at a different level. I think a lot of people are interfacing with ChatGPT, or they install Claude Code, they have one agent. And I'm kind of at that point of like, okay, what if we have many of these, a fleet that's kind of on deck, some of them are active, idle, and some of them are working continuously. And then can I put these tools in front of the best builders that I know, and what impact does it have on them? And it is staggering how much more effect it has on them. They become much more ambitious. They're like reaching milestones earlier than they would have imagined. And then they reimagine the team that they're building around this kind of new play styles. This is why I love working with startups, because if you think about startups as opposed to enterprises, like, you have no baggage. You're actually just already dead. Like, you're default dead. Like, you don't exist, and you don't have this like calcification of a bureaucracy and 1,000 employees. You don't even have enough employees to do what you're trying to do to stay alive. And so then they lean into the new technology. And so my job, I view it as like, scout the new technology and put it in front of the right person. And then it reveals to me, like, I get more validation. I was like, oh, it is truly that important of a technology. It ends up in their daily workflow. It ends up being something their whole team is like collectively contributing to. And I get a lot of feedback then, because I can use it myself and learn, but if I infuse my network with it, then I get a lot of feedback, and people are coming back to me 6 months later and they're like, I learned this new trick. Here's this crazy new ability that we have, and love to show it to you.
Yeah, the collective learning, the network, the allies, friends in learning, the iteration and learning is super key. So walk us through what a modern example would be, something concrete of like a product or a feature that a frontier model in the loop from day zero could do. Like, what does that process look like in the kind of in a few steps?
Well, actually, you know about this one. So we've been working on the Possible podcast, and you're obviously the host of Possible, and I've been kind of supporting the team behind the scenes. The big kind of push for the last couple of months has been, can we internationalize this podcast? And internationalize, not just like release the podcast and then translate the transcripts, but what if we were to recreate the same conversation, but natively in many different languages? So your voice, your co-host Arya, you and Arya both are the hosts of Possible, but can we re-release the podcast using your voices in Chinese, in French, in Hindi? And how many languages can we do that in? And how quickly can we expand into many different languages? And this was an interesting project because when we mentioned we were interested in translating, you've been working with translation of your content for a long time, but I was like, oh, this is perfect for agents because it is a coding problem. It is a problem that can be sliced up into a bunch of different small chunks, and then it can be largely parallelized. And so you're kind of cheating time, and you're cheating the like you're reaching into the general capabilities of language models and the increasingly general capabilities of voice models from 11 Labs. And so and also, at my last company at Clubhouse, when I was working there, we had an internationalization team. It was like 20 people, 25 people. And it took a long time to just launch in one new market. And that was in the pre-language model world. But now the language model speaks every language. The voice agents can generate almost 68 to 70 languages of the most popular languages on the planet. So you can almost think of a new kind of creator that emerges that's natively localized all over the planet, where, yeah, you might be an English first creator, but imagine if everyone could experience you in their first language. And so that's always been on my mind. But the second piece of like, can we do it with a very small team? And so I took this problem as I described it to you, and I went to Codex. I pulled up Codex, and I just talked about this problem for 10 minutes. And then I said, let's build agentic workflow that breaks down, atomizes this problem, and then reanimates the podcast in, say, 5 different languages. And a combination of Codex and Claude Code built the first version of that in one day. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that day, we had this, let's see. I'll run the app locally so I can show it to Reid. Here we go. So we'll pull up the pipeline. But I went to this coding agent, described the problem, and I was like, we need to atomize this, strip away how it was done, look at every new technology I show you that is now on our table that we have access to, and then resolve this problem using AI agents. And so we end up with this pipeline. Basically, you think we have a transcript. We have a transcript with 2 speakers. And the first step is to parse the transcript into turns. So we take each person's turns. Then we need to translate into a different language and transcreate. So we need to preserve the meaning of the original conversation. You don't want to do a literal translation because then you have like cultural idioms that come into play. And a lot of this is what we learned when we partnered with the human experts on each language. And it's been a very interesting journey because one technical person paired with a few language experts can actually localize an app or an experience or a podcast very quickly. And when I had the first version of the pipeline, it was like, great, we have the French translation pipeline working. And then Codex was like, would you like me to enable the other 68 languages? And that's when I was like, yes. We're not ready yet, but let's do it. I want to see that. We don't have all the human reviewers that we want in every language, but I was like, this is the awesome thing about thinking about it as like an AI native approach. It's like your agents are today, right now they're in English mode, but then you could just change one word, switch the language, and now they're transcreating the content into French, into Chinese, into Portuguese, and every single language, even like my mother tongue, Marathi, right? And I showed like a sample of the podcast to my parents, and they were like, whoa, this is it feels like NPR, but like from Maharashtra in India. It feels the quality was so their jaws dropped. So I think about this as like we did the first version in a day, and the agents were just ready to enable the next level of scale. And like we just need to get enough experts around it so we can raise the quality bar up to our expectations. But it's something that I could not imagine. We tried to do it, and it took like 25 people and several months to do it before. And now it's pretty much like
next couple of days.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things actually was particularly funny, and this is part of your general point that's important here is, look, there's a huge amplification that comes from the agents. But so we did French, and we did French early because, I've been spending some time in the French ecosystem trying to help various things. And so we released French as the very first Reid Riffs. And then we went to some of my French friends, and they said, well, that sounds like Canadian French.
That's right.
Yeah. Right. And I was like, oh, and we didn't know enough to know, but that was the reason why it's still worth cross-checking. And so then we redid it, again, using agents to be, Parisian French.
To delineate between all and the naive approach is that everyone who speaks French speaks the same.
Yes.
But no, actually French is spoken differently in the different parts of the world.
Yes.
And then I went back to the agents and I was like, guys, I was like, guys, we have to actually localize this.
Yeah.
This isn't about every language is one version, but actually every locality
Yes.
gets its own unique version. And then it was like, well, actually, we need to retrain the voices. So we need to create a French Reid. We need to create like a Parisian French Reid. We need to create a Parisian French Aria. And then realizing that we could do that, 11 Labs has some very cool voice remixing tools. And realizing we could do that, I was like, well, it seems like this same approach might work for every locality in other languages as well. So the idea that you're like solving this problem and the next problem and the next problem at the same time is very interesting. And also realizing that the models are getting way better. And when we started, we were using an 11 Labs model that didn't have intonation. And then now we're using the V3 model, which you can actually prompt inject emotional context, and we can create more animated. It's not just a robotic kind of recitation of the podcast. It's more like talking to someone that's very animated. And so the models, I think that's the huge thing there, is the models are getting better. And it was a leap in Codex's capabilities that showed me that I could do it in one day. But this is something that every week, every 2 weeks, there's some leap in capabilities, and I sit down on a fresh project and I'm just like, I aim a very hard problem. And I just say, hey, let's see where we can go. And I'm shocked at where you can go in just 1-2 hours of iteration, 8 hours of it thinking, and then that first version, and you're just like, this used to be 25 people and like 6 months, and now it's a day to the first version, and now we're like, okay, let's become more ambitious. Let's see how quickly we can like get this out there.
And by the way, one of the things, again, it's the re-broaden your imagination for stuff. And like, for example, this conversation hadn't occurred to me, but one of the fun things we might want to try with Reid Riffs, and probably using your agents in order to do this, is to essentially say, well, let's try Scottish English, Northern English, Welsh English,
Yep.
right? Classic English, and then release 4 versions of it with that kind of locality tuned, because that would be fascinating for people.
Yes.
So we should try that.
I agree. It's like, what's the extent of this? Like, I think of it as hyper local.
Yes.
Like, I even cloned my own voice and then like went very local into like India, and I was very like recreated my own voice as like a local in like 6 different languages in India, and I was very like, this is incredible. Like, now we can reach everyone in a very like in a way that they feel like natively like heard. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to show something with the tool?
Yeah. Well, I guess I could show you. Yeah.
It's up to you. You got to launch now.
Let's go with the possible FM. Find a transcript, podcast transcripts, and then let's go with RIP the computer keyboard. Oh, that one has Tanae. We don't have his voice. Let's go with Reid and Aria. So here we're going to take 2 paragraphs of the possible podcast. I'm going to paste it into our translation tool. So
Yes.
we have
Paris, custom version.
Yeah, so we have the custom voices that are Parisian French. We also have Beijing, Shanghai, which we're working on. And then we have a couple other markets we're looking at. But let's do Paris. And French, I had to delineate between Canada and France because it was a point of feedback that we got. So we have a podcast transcript. We have you and Aria, the hosts of Possible. And I'm going to click run. And I'll explain what's happening. So the first thing the system does is break it down into turns. And so this is your turn, this is Aria's turn. And then it's going to tag each turn with the emotional context appropriate for that moment in the conversation. It's as if it's like these agents are basically role-playing you guys in the conversation. Now it's tagging the conversation. And so we'll see these same turns of conversation where it's going to infuse emotional context. And that's the cool thing about the new 11 Labs V3 model, which is it's extremely realistic voice. So here we have frustrated, serious, and then the emphasizing, and then like you're making a very strong point in this turn of conversation, and so the AI is starting to assign that emotional context. Smiling, so hopefully like Aria's response is gonna be very like positive, curious when she asks the question, serious for her final point, and now it's actually translating the conversation into French, and so the next column will appear soon. And this is going to be the French translation column. We're almost done.
By the way, one other version, we should try this for fun at some point, is Klingon.
Oh,
Right.
Klingon. Yeah. We could release the podcast in Klingon.
Yes. Just to kind of show the
range.
The fact that the future is here.
Yeah. So now here, this cell right here has just come up, and this is the first draft French translation of this conversation so far. And so now it's in French. And what's happening is 11 Labs is generating the audio. It's basically reassembling the conversation using your voice clones, but now in French. And so
Kind of as we're doing this pop-up level, this is like an example of our workflow
yeah,
where something that was previously a massive stretch, maybe too expensive to do, then becomes something easy to start prototyping.
Yep.
And actually, even in, for Reid Riffs, we've deployed it in French.
Yep.
Right. And a huge amount of acceleration through agents, but then selective, intelligent use of humans in the loop.
Exactly.
For getting the product right, et cetera. And this is the parallel to, for example, a founder who might be thinking about like, okay, what's the way, like, we'll just start doing it. But like, where are the things where you use the AI to accelerate you and what you're doing? And then what are the places you bring in, experts, feedback, potential customers, et cetera.
So it looks like we have a French translation. We'll play a couple seconds of it.
Tu voudrais que le plus possible soit géré sur le territoire. Faire American Intelligence, c'est aussi avoir toute la chaîne complète. On se fait complètement dépasser parce que notre administration a l'air de croire que c'est une course sur les réseaux sociaux.
Être ici avec toi aujourd'hui. On a vu pas mal d'articles récemment qui parlent du boom des data centers, qui provoquent déjà une grosse vague d'embauches dans la construction et les métiers techniques.
Yeah.
And so that's Aria's voice.
All the way back to when we did this with the Perugia speech. Yeah. It's so mind-blowing to hear your own voice speaking a language like it's like the like the other Indian dialects that you're like, I don't speak that language, and yet that is my voice speaking that language.
It's kind of like accessing the multiverse.
Yes.
It's like, imagine if you were French.
Yes.
Here's a glimpse into that.
And this is all like kind of a very concrete dive for kind of saying, look, this is how to operate, how to do quick internal tooling, how to explore various versions of product market fit, all of the things that, I think basically, frankly, any credible founder today like has to be showing AI native. If you're not, then you basically shouldn't be doing a company.
Yeah. And we should be thinking like what parts of this workflow do we absolutely want to start aiming AI at, even just to get a baseline of its performance, even before we are like, oh, it's good enough. And I just asked our coding agent to tell us how many agents are we using in this system? Yeah. Because, okay, here we go. We're using 6 agents. So the first agent tags each turn of conversation with emotions to guide the delivery of the voice. Then there's there's an agent for single turn tagging. Then there's an agent that translates it into the target language. Then there's an agent that validates it, making sure that the transcript is still holding the conversational tags. Then there's an agent that listens to the generated audio. So we generate the audio, then it transcribes it, and then it listens. It's like, yep, that looks like what we're aiming for. And then and there's a second agent that's verifying language on the other end. And part of this is like thinking like, how much of this can we double check and triple check and generate and regenerate before the person has to come back in and do the final approval? And I'm pretty excited about how much of this we do before our experts come in, because our experts are then like, let's focus on this part of the idioms, making the tech references, especially how do you preserve the meaning of like something that is hard to explain in different language. You have to have like an expert in that culture, in the idioms of the culture, and like then you get into trans creation. All of our agents are using GPT 4.1, and it runs on the Agents SDK. But the reason this system is possible is because I said use the Agents SDK to solve this workflow. So I went to the smartest model and I said we're going to use agents and then create the next version of this pipeline.
So part of this is amazing amounts are now doable by individuals. But so how does that reconceptualize possibilities in founding teams, right? So what might now be possible in terms of founding teams, what they should look like, what might be different from a founding team 5 years ago?
I think the biggest difference is, of course, you want to embrace the technical velocity that we have accessible. So if you're, your CTO, the first technical person should be learning how to use Claude Code or Codex, maybe both, and then very quickly moving to a level where they can orchestrate a small fleet of, say, 20 of those at the same time. That there is a slight learning curve there, but it is so much more worth it for the most senior first technical person attacking anything to adopt that mindset. And you should be willing to spend the money on these tools because actually, like, it cascades through the rest of the hires that you make, the rest of the people that you bring on. You're going to want each person to be individually amplified. And so what's different is that maybe each person has some kind of like compute spend, which is maybe even equivalent to like, you know, a contractor hire equivalent of like Claude code spend and a coding agent spend in aggregate. And an agent spend in aggregate, like it is almost like you think about that as like a first party kind of approach to the problem. And I think that the person who embraces these workflows is going to see at least 50 to 70% increase in productivity. And then looking for generalists, people that quickly adapt into multiple roles. So I think the PM that can vibe code, that can quickly convince you of a new design choice, right? It's like, oh, maybe it's not production grade, but it gets you the team thinking about a new way that the product could be designed.
Potentially weeks faster.
Yeah, weeks faster. Yeah, exactly. And I think that like starting with that expectation of speed, and then because, you know, as companies grow, like, or, you know, we tend to get slower as we have the coordination tax builds up, but starting very quickly unpacking the hypotheses before, and you'll reach these realizations before you even have to raise money, or then when you do raise money, you raise for different reasons. And I see that in the startups that I'm advising is that they can go much further with, you know, with a very small team and a strong core of like agentic tools.
The thing I would add is, you know, kind of classic, you know, call it 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, was you have a business person or technical person, you know, as the kind of co-founders doing something. And if you had only a business person, they would hire a technical person. If you had only a technical person, they'd hire a business person. And I agree with you about that. But I also think that one of the first jobs for the technical person is to similarly make sure that the business person is amplified
That's
that
right.
way too.
That's
Right?
yeah.
Like it's not just, okay, this is the way I'm doing my workflow for DevOps and for experimenting with product design, for product market fit and the rest. Yes, but also amplify.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's right. Yeah, and I think they should be using state-of-the-art models as well. Like everyone should in your small team should be using state-of-the-art models that help them with all aspects of their work. Right, your general co-pilot, using the best one available. You know.
So, you know, one of the things that, you know, there's a partially because we live in a media environment and obviously, you know, Hollywood's tied itself into knots about AI and all the rest of this stuff, and you live down there,
Yeah.
you know, so you see a lot of it, like we're using it, but we're not telling anybody because, you know, it's kind of unpopular.
Yeah.
But even though it's such a clear amplifier, it's kind of like there needs, as opposed to a Masonic handshake, there needs to be an AI handshake now.
Or it's like I finally get to tell a story. I was never even in Hollywood.
Yes.
You know, I could just I have an idea. Now we can put the first version. For $300, you can make the first version, and like in the same way that we're vibe coding prototypes. We're vibe coding storytelling. We're like animating and creating these worlds as like concepts. And they may eventually become bigger things in a traditional format.
Yeah.
But they don't have to either.
Yeah, but the speed of using it, exploration, iterative development, it's the same thing where you learn by doing. You learn by seeing what you did on your first iteration. Like the first, like you said, okay, let's use agents to build it. Oh, wait, we need an emotional tagger. Is kind of as ways of doing this. So it's kind of our last question for the moment for kind of AI in kind of startups is what ways do you look at when you look at startups and see, is that AI as marketing or is that AI as real? How should people think about that themselves? Like, am I being real enough? Am I being AI native enough? I'm not just using AI as a buzzword bingo to try to get money or attention or anything else. Like, and what does that real AI traction look like?
Yeah, there's a lot of that I see going around these days, which is this buzzword kind of like this buzzword era of AI this, AI enabled, AI powered. And you're kind of, and maybe it's because I interact with all these models, I'm kind of like, but which model? What AI? Like what actually, do you even need the AI or are you just shoving it in there so that you can say that it's AI? And for me, it's like, if you don't go one level deeper, it makes me very skeptical. It makes me wonder if there's anything of value here at all, or if it's just pure signaling in order to get attention or like to send a kind of message to people that wouldn't be able to discern. And I think that the other way to put it is can you describe what it is you're doing without using the letters AI? If you can't, then maybe the AI isn't the important thing here. And then the other thing I see is like, it's not even about the AI. Like the AI powers, it's like, does anyone care what database technology Uber is sitting on? No, like the actual person, it's like if you were to sit in the car and you were like, oh, well, like the average person just wants to get from point A to point B safely. And like, so a lot of that is like not even relevant to the end user. And it's actually, I imagine a world that I want to live in where AI is under the hood and taken for granted because it's just so good at what it does and it stays out of the way. And it's not making itself the whole, like that is not the purpose, right? It's in service of the actual objective that we have, which is maybe create a new artifact, learn something, or build a product. And I think that AI is like, when AI blends into the background, that's the best version of this.
Possible is produced by Palette Media. It's hosted by Ari Finger and me, Reid Hoffman. Our showrunner is Sean Young. Possible is produced by Tanasi Delos, Katie Sanders, Spencer Strassmore, Imo Zhu, Trent Barboza, and Tafadzwa Nimarundwe.
Special thanks to Surya Yalamanchili, Saida Sapieva, Ian Alice, Greg Beato, Parth Patil, and Ben Rellis.